Serious, what paranormal experiences have He went down into the basement and just said, to no one in particular, that he had a young daughter upstairs and could they please be careful with the door. Ever since then, the basement door would open and then slowly shut on its own. "5 or 6 hours straight without wearing my seatbelt. I then had a sudden urge to buckle my seatbelt. Less than 2 minutes later a driver crossed the center line, clipped my car, causing a massive accident. My car rolled over and I walked away with bruises and scratches. I'm certain if I hadn't followed that urge, I wouldn't be here today. Still can't explain why or how that happened." I was in basic training at featuring Knox and we were on a very long road march when out of nowhere this beautiful yellow lab with no collar that looked exactly like my dog at home comes up to me and walks beside me of all people for a few minutes before running back into the woods. This was a big boost to me because you needed to finish the march as one of the requirements to graduate and I was dragging butt due to stress fractures in my feet. I was able to finish and we earned some phone time to call home where my mom informed me that I had to put my dog down. She was sick before I left and they were hoping she could hold on another week but she just got too bad. When that dog came up to me it was literally out of nowhere. There wasn't any houses around for miles. One of the things her and I love to do was to go on runs together so I like to think that was her coming up to me to say goodbye. Nothing too crazy, but camping in the desert in Utah. I was a wilderness guide and lived out of my truck, so camped nearly every night. So totally used to weird noises, twigs cracking, whatever. But one night it was extremely calm and quiet. Just a weird vibe in the air. A couple friends and I were on BLM land in Utah near Moab, and we had just put out the fire and laid our bags out. Just as I was starting to fade out, something grabbed me by my wrists and jerked my arms straight up into the air. I sat up immediately and 2 of my friends bolted up at the same time. We all had it happen to us, and we couldn't explain it. Nothing else happened, but still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I think about it. My father said that he's frequently seen a woman in a white dress at the top of our stairs, where the bedrooms are, between 2-4 in the morning. During that time, if I choose to go to the bathroom, I have this incredibly unsettling feeling, like I shouldn't be out in that hallway for any reason. My boyfriend and I have also seen our 7-month-old son looking up the stairs watching something move around. There hasn't been anything too terrible or truly scary, but it's definitely odd. When I was about 12 and started getting left alone at home, something used to shush me. I'd be pouring cereal, singing along to the TV and suddenly, shhhhhhhh. First time it happened I absolutely crapped myself and didn't say a word until someone came home. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't think anyone would believe me. I'd even start to convince myself it was just my imagination but then it would happen again. I think it happened about 5 or 6 times. One Saturday morning I was in my top bunk. The beds were super noisy and the slightest of moves would result in them creaking. Shhhhhhhh. I thought it was my younger sister and decided to annoy her further. I started rocking about in my bunk making as much noise as I possibly could and suddenly, shhhhhhh. I chuckled, still thinking it was my sister, and then she whispered nervously from below, "Was that you? The shushing, was that you?" I popped my head down and said no, it was you. She looked terrified. Her eyes welled up with tears and she said no it wasn't. She ran out of the room crying and wouldn't come back in for a long time. I realized it must have been the shushy ghost and was overcome with relief that I wasn't crazy because someone else had actually bloody heard it. Haven't heard it since. I'm always kind of waiting. What a rude freaking ghost. My grandmother died of brain cancer about 20 years ago. About 2 weeks after she died I was hanging out over at my parents' place and my mom got a call. No number, no unknown number, just blank caller ID. She answered it, got quiet, hung up and went to her room without saying anything. When I finally got her to talk about it, she said it was her mother, saying she was trapped and please come get her because they wouldn't let her leave, over and over again, and then the phone disconnected. I asked her about it a few years ago and she denied that it happened for a bit and then admitted that it had happened 2 more times that year and then stopped, but she didn't want to discuss it anymore. My grandmother has dementia and sometimes sees things that aren't there. There's never a rhyme or reason to these things she says she sees except when I'm around. She always sees the same man and little boy in the room with me every week. I just started working in a lab in August. Since I started, my co-workers have told me about all sorts of paranormal activity that has happened in the lab. I listened to their stories but never put much stock in them. One day about 3 months into the job, I was late setting up a specimen and ended up staying behind while everyone else left. The hood I was using is in a corner, and I couldn't really see anything except what was right in front of me without turning my chair. Out of nowhere, I heard and felt footsteps rushing towards me. The lab is on the 3rd floor of a 4-story building, and the rest of the building is completely unoccupied, and a gust blew past me. I turned to look, and there was nobody there. Spooky science ghosts. A week or so after my childhood dog had to be put down due to cancer in his mouth, me and my family started hearing his usual footsteps coming down our stairs. He was the best dog. We buried him in our yard and 10-year-old me painted him a gravestone that still marks the spot. It was nice to hear from him a few more times after we lost him. A few years ago, my sister was married to a soldier in the British Army and he was stationed in Germany. We all visited her and she knew I was interested in history, so for a day out, we visited Belsen, the former Nazi concentration camp. As we were walking around, my sister was pushing the pram with my nephew in it. He was 1 or 2 years old at the time. The thing about Belsen is that after the war, it was burned to the ground, so it's more or less blank fields. As we walked, we passed a tree when my nephew asked my sister who the kids were behind us. We all turned around and no one was there. My sister asked which kids, and he replied the ones in the pajamas. Yet again, no kids anywhere to seen. We all knew for a fact that he has no idea what country he was in, yet alone know about the horrible events which occurred at that camp. 2 years ago, I woke up around 1 AM thinking, I can never go home again. It was the most intense sense of homesickness I've ever experienced, full of panic and regret. I tried to calm myself down. Logically, of course I could. My parents lived just a couple hours away, still in my childhood home. I'd fought hard to get away from the suburb I grew up in, so why this sudden intense longing? The next day, I got a call that my dad had been hospitalized during the night and was in the ICU. He didn't make it out, and while the house is still there, it's not home anymore. When I was in high school, the days before cell phones were common, my friends were to come over to pick me up from my house one night. We had made plans at school for them to pick me up at 7 PM. At 6, my parents said I had to come with them to do something, and I totally forgot to call my friends and tell them. They came to my house at 7 PM and called the house phone. No one answered. There was 4 of them in the car. They all told us the exact same story. They said that they were about to pull out of my driveway, but they saw someone peek through the blinds from the bedroom on the top floor right. That was my room, so they assumed that I was fricking around. 5 more times, they said that someone would peek through the blinds, and a couple of them said they even 15, and they were still in our driveway. One of my friends came over and said they thought I was messing with them. Then they asked me, "So, who's staying in your room?" I told them that channel. You can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.